All right, awesome. Good evening. Welcome to the 40th Ward Quarterly Town Hall, first one of 2025. We'll be going over a lot, so buckle up. First, we're going to go over some ground rules with everyone. We're sure folks will have questions. We'll be presenting a lot. What we ask is that folks hold their questions until the end. We do have index cards for folks to be able to write down any questions they may have as they come up, and then we'll do Q&A at the end, okay? Awesome. All right, let's get started. All right, so first I want to make sure that you all know the team. We actually have two teams. We have a 40th Ward office team as well as the committee team. So we'll go over each person. First, you got myself, 40th Ward Alderperson Andre Vasquez, reporting for duty. How y'all doing? Then we've also got our Chief of Staff, Kat Sharp. Right there, you give it up. We've got our Director of Neighbor Services, Deirdre O'Connor. Also a district counselor for the 20th district with some respect on the name. All right, and then next, we've got a Director of Communications and Outreach. We've got Allison Murphy. Remember Allison? Yeah, that's right, Murph. That's right. Those who know. And we've got our Ward Superintendent, Bill Hoenalo. He was been here before all of us, putting in that solid work. Give it up for Bill. Yep. We've also got our Deputy Director of Neighbor Services, Samantha Sam Martinez. Sam, where you at?
She might still be signing.
Up by the table, gotcha.
Yeah.
And then we've got Nora Fabra, who's one of our neighbor engagement coordinators, and Yasmin Chowdhury, who's also a neighbor service coordinator. Both of them really help out the office. Yep, give it up. And then we've got the Committee on Immigrant and Refugee Rights, where I am the chair, and we've got 3 staff members there. We've got Pooja Ravindan, who some of y'all may recall was the Chief of Staff in the 40th Ward office, is now our policy chief. We've got Diana Perez, who's our engagement director. Those of you who might have volunteered for the 20th District Mutual Aid, when we were helping out the new arrivals, we recognize Diana putting in a lot of work here in the ward. And we've got Elle Snyder, who works at the ward office and is the operations director.
And Mars.
And Mars. Mars Gendy, we gotta get you up. We gotta get you on a picture. So Mars Gendy as well, who is also our arts liaison and helps with scheduling, which you might imagine is a pretty heavy chore when we've got all the meetings happening. So thank you, Mars, as well. All righty. We like to start out with a mantra. I want every single constituent to know, to love, to adore, to absorb. This government belongs to you. You all pay for it. Your tax dollars pay for our salaries. We want to make sure we constantly reinforce that so you know your agency as it relates to government. Lord knows we need it when it comes to all the different levels of government. We want to make sure you know that because then you're able to best hold it accountable. So we want to make sure, and our mission is to make sure that city government is accessible, transparent, and accountable to you, our neighbors, and we're constantly working to improve all of those areas of focus. So we are guided by 40th Ward core principles. We want to share these so you all know kind of what our mindset is as we do this work. First and foremost are these services. This is what we get all the calls for. Like I like to remind our folks, we are the complaint department for the city of Chicago. Rightfully so. Happy to get them and be able to address them. So thank you for sending them regularly. Next, we've got safety, right? A connected community is a safer one. We want to make sure we talk about our public safety, not just as it relates to like crime incidents, but also for our pedestrians, our seniors, make sure the streets are safer as people just try to get to where they need to go, right? There's multiple things when we think about safety. We want to make sure we look at it more holistically, so we address instances where safety need in the immediate, as well as the root causes of some of the incidents we might see happening. Next, we've got development and infrastructure. So these are 2 different things that kind of feel the same, but we want to clarify for folks. Development is watching the growth of a community. So when you're talking about your business districts, for example, making sure that the housing's affordable, that people can stay in the places they live, and that we have abundance of affordability for people who want to live in the 40th Ward, that's our development piece. Infrastructure is fixing all of the things, your streetscapes, your road repairs, your bridges, right? Those 2 things really kind of go together to create an ecosystem of what we want to see as a thriving community, but they are kind of different, so we do cover both as well. Next is community engagement. We are only as good as the engagement and information you get from our neighbors. If we don't know about a thing to work on, kind of hard to work on it, right? But what we also know is we're made better when we work together as a team. Those of you who have either benefited or volunteered for Shovel Squad know what I'm talking about. We've got neighbors that come together, help each other out, and really tie us together as a community in a way that we believe is fundamentally important. I think equally as we look at the times we're in, we all understand the importance of knowing our neighbors and want to make sure we continue to provide opportunities to do so. And then finally, forward focus. If we're not improving this thing, if we're not making government work better, if we're not making it more effective, more efficient, more responsive to the needs of our neighbors, status quo doesn't get it done. And what you all will then see is there might be a rise in cost and a rise in property tax, but you might not see the return on the investment. Our job is to make sure we articulate that return and we continue improving that level of return. So whether it is, Shovel Squad or our environmental boards or all the other things we do to support our neighbors, we constantly want to make sure we communicate that out, which is why we try to make sure we get the word out in every platform possible to make it convenient for you all to understand what government can do for you. All right? This is how we get a leg up on board officers. But that's all I got. That's a joke. All right. So we want to make sure that we have our teams lead on these things. And so I'd like to introduce our Director of Neighbor Services, David O'Connor, and our Deputy Director, Sam Martinez, to talk to Neighbor Services. Please give it up.
Hi, everyone. Okay. So I'm going to go over how to file service requests and also the most frequent ones that we get and that the city or the ward gets. Okay, so 311. So this is what the city gets. In 2024, the top ones were graffiti removal requests, pothole in streets, and abandoned vehicle complaints. And in 2024, the city completed over 22,000 requests. Okay, now this is the ward office, okay? Our top requests last year were policy requests or feedback, which is very important to us, construction complaints and inquiries, and a letter of exception request, which has to do with parking. And our team completed almost 7,000 requests last year. Okay, how do we get these service requests? One of the main ways is through 311. So, as you can see here, you can either call 311, you can go to their website, or you can download the app and file a service request. So if you need a new garbage bin, you can just go to the website or the app, click that button, and then you'll be prompted with the category. So if you wanted a new bin, go ahead and click garbage and recycling. And now, we don't get notifications when these 311s are made, so if you want us to know about it, we really recommend reaching out to us. So you can visit us, you can call us, you can fill out our contact form at 40thward.org/contact. So this is just some screenshots of how the form looks. We just request some basic contact information, a description of the problem, or just some questions that you need help answering. And then you can also upload photos. You can list that 311 service request number. So if you haven't gotten that garbage bin, it's been a month, you can list that there, tell us the situation, and we can follow up. And then you can also subscribe to the newsletter on there. Okay, now I'm going to hand it off to our director, Deirdre.
Give it up for Sam. This is great. You guys reach out 9 out of 10. Sam's the one who's answering your email, giving you a call back, handling really a lot of the requests that come through. It's an important part. So Sam went over some of the 311 requests and requests that come through our office. And if you've been to one of these town halls before, we talk about tree trims a lot. Tree trims is a huge thing that neighbors reach out to us all the time, especially after a rainstorm. You see branches down. Again, the city has moved from a tree trim request individually to a gridded system. So currently they are in the Arcadia Terrace area, where they have been for the better part of a year. It turns out that when you go and you trim each tree down a block, it takes a significant amount of time. But the idea is that they don't have to come back to your block for another 7 years. So they're about 98% through Arcadia Terrace, and they're going to move to another grid. So just to remind you all what a tree trim emergency is, That's if you visibly see that a tree limb is cracked or hanging. This happens a lot after a windstorm or a real bad thunderstorm, or if the tree is uprooted from the ground. That is what 311 constitutes as an emergency. They did recently allow folks to submit a tree emergency on 311, so it's important to remember, is this a tree emergency, or is a tree branch hitting my window and it's really annoying and causing a nuisance? Although it is a nuisance, it's not considered an emergency. I do recommend you use our contact form. You take a picture of it, you send it to us. I manage the tree trims, and what we can do is we can put a heat map in, so when forestry comes to us and says, hey, what's the next grade you want to work on, we can kind of put that heat map and be like, oh, we've got a lot of neighbors complaining about this area, and we'll go ahead and we'll get that area handled, just to be equitable. We have improved upon communication with forestry. We did have some money allocated to a tree portal. That portal hasn't exactly been up and working yet, but we do now have a dedicated staff member, Ladiva, who emails us weekly to tell us which streets, the streets and sanitation, are actually working on. So if you are like, hey, I see these signs up, which I'll remind you that they are orange signs, and the Bureau of Forestry is only in the ward on Tuesdays, or sometimes Saturdays when they're handling emergencies. So when you see your orange sign, it'll say one Tuesday date and another Tuesday date, because they post for 2 weeks at a time. Because again, we don't know how long it's going to take them to be able to go through the block and trim all of those trees on the block. But again, if something's hitting your window, if you're like, this tree is dead, it looks like it needs to come down, we encourage you to just reach out to us and make sure that we get a tree removal in there. We'll make sure that we have record of that, and we can continue with that. Pothole patrol, our favorite. I do believe that Andre might be the only alder who does this, but twice a year, staff, the alder, some interns, we get into our car and we drive every single street in the 40th Ward, and we take a list of all of the potholes that we see in the ward and get them built. Andre has already done one sweep, so we did do north of Peterson, and those have all been tracked. But why we do it and why it's so important is we want to make sure that we are making note of the worst streets in the ward, because if we know we're coming back to Ravenswood time and time again, we know that that street needs to get repaved, right? So it's just a way of us to stay on top of what streets need the most attention. You can file a 311 for your pothole requests through the 311 app. We encourage you to do so. If you just, even on your block, if you go out and you're like, hey, there's a pothole, it helps us, it helps the drivers, it helps the suspension of your vehicles, all sorts of fun stuff. And you can always just reach out to us and send us a picture, and we can have that submitted for you. Sewers and street flooding. I know that we did have that bad batch of unseasonable rain a couple weeks ago where it really did flood the ward in an unprecedented way. A lot of times, shout out to Craig, our neighbor, who sent us this beautiful photo. You see your neighbors out with a rake. A lot of times what just needs to happen, because our street sweeping isn't a perfect system, we have a lot of debris in the street, and when it rains, it clogs the drain. So a lot of times, if you're able to get out there, use your rake, use a shovel to clear that sewer drain, you'll find that that water does drain, but a lot of times that's not the case. So we do ask you wait 24 hours to see if the water has gone down. If it hasn't, there are a couple 311s that you can put in. A sewer clean inspection. And a lot of times DWM is really familiar with a lot of these drains, and they kind of know, like, oh yeah, this is one of those problem ones. And they'll be able to jump on that immediately. We do ask that you always reach out to our office if you're seeing in 24 hours. I see some neighbors from Maplewood that had some issues with the water not going down, so just let us know and we'll get with DWM and we'll make sure that that gets addressed. Curb stoning. How many people stoning is. Bane of my existence, for sure. So yeah, curb stoning, we see it a lot in the 40th Ward. And this is when you see a series of unplated vehicles parked on the street, for sale signs, if you're off of Western or off of Peterson, close to a car dealership, there are just an amount of vehicles that don't move from the streets that are unplated and make parking extremely difficult on your block. This is something that continues to come in, and a lot like the tree trims, right? We saw that there were people complaining about how long it took a tree trim to happen. We had this curb stoning issue, and we're like, how do we address this to solve the problem? So how it is right now is you can contact the city, they go and they put a tow sticker on the car, then that person who owns the car has 7 days to move it. So a lot of times you'll see they'll just move it across the street, move it down the street, but it doesn't go anywhere. So what we wanted to do is change that legislation. So the alderman worked with a couple other alders to change the legislation. So now, if there is a vehicle that is unplated, or has a for sale sign on it, or you can prove that someone is selling it on Craigslist or somewhere, Facebook Marketplace, we can immediately put a tow sticker on that, and the police don't have to wait, they can immediately tow.
Can you repeat that? What do you have to find?
So if you, currently how it is, you have to wait 7 days. But now, if you report it to us, and we'll report it to the police, you make and model of the car, where it's parked in front of, and then, or if it has a for sale sign, right, or you find it on an internet for sale page, Craigslist or something, you're not allowed to sell your vehicle, your personal vehicle, anybody's vehicle on a city street in Chicago. It's just, that's the law. So again, we're not trying to go after these individual people. It's more so the people that abuse the system itself, who are these unlicensed car dealers who are selling these cars that are taking up the majority of street parking and creating really a dangerous thing for a lot of neighbors who have to walk several blocks to their house. So we just want to try and curb the problem.
Can you recap that last? I mean, it seemed like I kind of lost the thread there. You said formerly it was 7 days, and then they just moved the car. But Andre and some other owners got some legislation through to.
Yeah, we literally changed
what's
this.
that new?
Yeah, we changed the city ordinance. So if you see it,
We haven't yet.
sorry.
Don't jinx it.
Let me not get ahead of myself. I apologize. It is up for a vote tomorrow at City Council, so it is not officially passed. Let me not kind of put somewhere. But if you report it, they no longer have to slap a sticker and wait 7 days. It can be towed immediately if it doesn't have proper registration or a for sale sign on it.
Thank
Is
you.
that correct?
Yep. No license plate. Gone.
So we hope that it will just truly deter folks from creating this side business of selling cars on the public way. But again, if you do see this, we want to just make sure that we're staying up with 20 and 24 and letting them know. We do have areas in the ward that are like, let us know if we don't, the more the merrier, because we really do want to curb this problem. Okay, that's it for me. I want to invite up Cash, our chief staff.
Thank you, Hillary. Curb stoning is definitely a public safety issue that we work with CPD, but I'm sure when you think about public safety, you're more interested in what violent crime trends we are seeing in our neighborhood and in our community. So I serve as the liaison with our CPD commanders with the 20th, 24th, 19th, and 17th districts, our 4 districts. We also work with the state's attorney's office and our district counselors. You might not know this, but Deirdre O'Connor, who just talked, is the one of the district counselors for the 20th district, which we are currently in right now. So, it's exciting to have an expert on public safety in our office too. So when we look at how our ward ranks citywide. We are one of the safest wards right now in the city of Chicago. We're in the top 10. I think specifically we are the 8th safest ward when we look at 2024 violent crime statistics. So we have last year 40.7 violent crime victimizations per 10,000 residents. We have about 60,000 residents in our ward. When we look more thoroughly at what we're talking about when we're talking about violent crime, we're talking about shooting victimizations, robberies, homicide. You can see the breakdown here. 2024, we did actually see a decrease in virtually every category. The one exception that we did see an increase in last year compared to 2023 was robbery victimizations. We did see a spike in robberies last year around January, February, and March. Some of the trends that we saw last year was, and luckily we are not seeing this year so far, is that there were robbery crews who would hotwire like a Kia or a Hyundai. Those are especially easy to hotwire. And would use that to go and commit a string of robberies all across the north side. So that was also not specific to our neighborhood either. So that is part of the spike that we saw last year. It's not on here, but so far this year compared to the same time last year, we are down in violent crime by about 24%. So fingers crossed we continue to see that decrease. So what does our office do? Our biggest role is we're here to be communicators. We're here to escalate concerns to CPD and our other public safety officials. So we have regular check-ins with CPD and try to get real-time communication. So if you see a citizen app alert and you're wondering what's going on, I'm probably also seeing the same alert that you're seeing, and I'm reaching out to CPD to try and understand if it's a verified incident. If you're subscribed to one of those apps, they don't necessarily communicate out verified incidents. They're just going off of calls for service. They're listening over to like a dispatch line, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a verified incident. For example, if you're reading our recent newsletter, there had been a call for a armed robbery with 5 people in an alley. There was a citizen app alert. Our office started receiving messages. I reached out to the 20th district, and they let us know that they conducted a field investigation and a field interview with the caller who made the report. And the caller said, actually, that wasn't real. Can you all give me a ride? So it was not a verified incident. It was something that the person, calling kind of made up in their own words. And so that's why we really try to get verified information. So if you're on our newsletter, we will send out a newsletter alert if we hear about a particular incident that we think the community needs to know about with the verified information that we have at the time, as well as typically a report number and the phone number to the appropriate division of detectives who might be investigating that case should you happen to have any information that's relevant for that case. We also, I see Matt from the chamber who's here. We've also done some wonderful business canvases to make sure all of our businesses know how to, best protect themselves in whatever way they can from burglaries and break-ins. We have seen some of that in Andersonville, unfortunately. And citywide, we are talking about CPD staffing. There's currently a CPD workforce allocation study that has finally started. Right now, CPD districts have different numbers of officers assigned, and those officers are frequently shifted around to different districts. So there hasn't really been a thorough study determining what the right staffing size is per district. So we're looking forward to that. The other piece, which we'll get into, is safe streets infrastructure. So I'm sure you think about, speed humps and bump outs. If we physically slow down some of these people who are running in and out of the neighborhood, these robbery crews who are using vehicles, that is also addresses some public safety issues. We also, the alderperson and I, have also worked with the Office of Public Safety Administration, OPSA, to request what are called license plate reader cameras. So this is a map of license plate reader requests and installations, as well as speed camera requests that are happening in our ward. So the dark blue, so hopefully none of you are colorblind, it's a little hard to discern the difference between the two. But the dark blue there are license plate readers. So those are not speed cameras. They are cameras that are set up at major intersections that are pointed at specific lanes that catch license plates, and it shares the video real time with our CPD districts. So there's typically someone in a room who has access to these cameras, so that does allow CPD to do real-time tracking. Say if there's a vehicle that's been used in a robbery or a homicide, they're able to more effectively track that vehicle. Speed cameras, the Department of Transportation has had a moratorium on speed cameras, and there are some very strict state laws around speed cameras, so they have to be installed close to a park or a school. They have recently lifted a moratorium they had on new installations, so they've told us that they are moving forward with an installation near Damon and Foster. We did have a fatal hit and run drunk driver accident that occurred in the fall of 2023. So there is both a license plate reader camera there, as well as the new speed camera will be going in there. That's near a high school, Winnemac Park, and Chappelle Elementary School. So we feel confident it's going to be a good location there. How can you get involved? So I mentioned our 4 police districts that we have. If you live north of Peterson, you are in the 24th district. We have a new commander, Allison Christian, who's there. If you're between Lawrence and Peterson, you're in the 20th district with Commander Beth Gilmeyer, who's also new. And then we have smaller sections of the 19th and 17th districts. So if you're west of the river in Ravenswood Manor, you're in the 17th. And if you're south of Lawrence, between Western and the river, then you're in the 19th district. We work with all of these districts, so feel free to reach out should there be anything you're looking to connect with there. These sections also have their smaller beat boundaries. So I know some of these folks, I know some of you have attended your beat meetings before. Who's been to a beat meeting before? Awesome, a good number of people. So if you're really looking for more specific statistics or looking for more information about a specific incident that's occurred in your neighborhood, there are beat meetings that occur for your specific area that occur typically every other month. I can't break down all of the date info on here, but I think it's on our website and our events calendar. You should also sign up for our newsletter to get real-time updates when we have verified information. You should go to your beat meeting and your district council meetings. They host those once a month, and I'll show you on the next slide when they are. But the most important thing that I really want to emphasize is that if you are a victim of a crime, or if you are a witness to a crime, you should call 911 and you should file an official police report. We have gotten a lot of emails and requests to our office where someone will be a witness to something, or they'll be a victim to something, and they will, post on Facebook or send a message to our office, but they won't file an official report. If you're not filing an official report, then it is not officially going to CPD to do any further investigation. So if you do want something to be investigated by CPD, by detectives, make sure that you're filing an official police report. This year, the police report numbers typically start with like JH25. And that number also helps us too. If you're looking for more information from our office on, hey, this incident occurred, I filed a police report, but I haven't heard anything back, can you help me figure out what's going on? If you give us that police report number, that makes it much easier for us to talk to CPD to get updates on whatever has occurred. And these are going to be district council meetings. So Deirdre, I mentioned, is one of your local district counselors. But we also have these other lovely folks. I know the 17th district is, I think, appointing their 3rd district counselor maybe this week. and you should attend all of their meetings. And I am going to hand this off to Allison Murphy. Allison is not going to be taking on development for the next year. That is going to be split up between myself and Deirdre, depending on the projects. But she personally has done a ton of stuff in the 2024 year that she's going to go over with you all.
I did build all of these things personally. So we did a bunch in 2024, and we have a bunch more coming up in 2025. I'm going to run through these fairly quickly because, as some of you may know, we do a development and infrastructure specific town hall every year, usually around the time construction season starts. So we're going to have much more information about all of these things at that town hall. But in the meantime, I'll give you a little overview. So the first and perhaps most exciting thing that we were able to get done in 2024 was the long-awaited opening of the Peterson Ridge Metro Station. 12 years in the making. It took a long time and many construction meetings, but it is complete, and the great news is that we have found out that as of October, they saw a 55% increase in riders along the UPN line since Peterson Ridge opened, which is huge and a lot more than we expected. I know the alderperson specifically is on that thing on a regular basis trying to get to City Hall. So, secondly, we also had a number of street improvement projects in 2024. My apologies for all the traffic. I know it was a lot this year. I would love to tell you it's going to be less this year. I would not lie to you, but the year after next, I think it's going to be a lot better. So a couple things we did get done this year. The Lawrence Avenue streetscape is complete as of this year. We were actually supposed to host a ribbon cutting this morning, and then it was extremely cold. So we are going to do that later in the year when it's warmer. But it is nonetheless complete and very beautiful. So if you have not been down to Lawrence, between Western and the river, you should go check it out. We also completed phase 1 of the Lincoln Avenue streetscape, so that's everything from Catalpa to Foster, and it's also Catalpa itself between Western and Lincoln. So phase 1 of that project is complete. Phase 2 has begun and will complete this year. And then in addition to those 2 big projects, we had 4 what are known as arterial resurfacing projects, which is when they resurface one of the major streets, and usually at the same time they're also doing pedestrian safety improvements along the way. So curb repairs, curb replacements, and often other types of pedestrian safety improvements as well. So we had 4 this past year. We had one on Western, Damon, Bryn Mawr, and California. Of those, Bryn Mawr and California are completely done. Damon and Western are mostly done. They've been resurfaced and all of the curbs and sidewalk replacements are done, but they will be coming back next year for a couple of other pedestrian safety improvements, which we'll go over in just a little bit. We also had a number of traffic safety projects happen. Most of the projects, the major streetscape projects that we do, involve some level of pedestrian safety. They have to, in fact, by law, include pedestrian safety anytime they're doing a street resurfacing project. So in addition to those, we also had a few that we want to shout out. The Leland Greenway is a project that folks have been waiting on for quite a while, and that was completed as of December 2024. You can see over here a picture of Alderman Martin and Alder Vasquez biking the Greenway before it was done. We haven't gotten to bike the completed Greenway next, but that's on the list. We also have the Winnemac Greenway that leads from the west of the park up to Winnemac added this past year. We also did, in phase 1 of the Lincoln Avenue streetscape, there are now protected bike lanes along Lincoln, and those will be extended all the way to Ainsley this next year. And then as part of the Damon and Western projects, we had lots of safety improvements. There are some bump outs along Damon Avenue that you might have noticed. And then also this year, there's going to be raised intersections at some of the main intersections that lead to Winnemac Park and to Amundsen. This basically can function like a very, very large speed hump to make cars slow down and just be more aware of where they are and the fact that there are students and kids and all kinds of people crossing the street. And then on Western, they are also going to be adding some more pedestrian islands at some of the key intersections later this year. One thing I really want to point out, because I get this question all the time, especially about bump outs, because I think bump outs are like a fairly new type of infrastructure for people, and they want to know why on earth we're putting in all these random large curbs. I'm going to tell you why. Bump outs specifically do a few things. They increase visibility so you can see people crossing the street. They prevent cars from parking in front of a crosswalk so that you're not in a position where when you're walking out on the street, oh God, no one's knocking over microphones here today. When you are walking out onto the street, you make sure people can see you well in advance. You're not stepping out from behind a car. So it does all kinds of great things, but the question I get from people a lot is like, what is this doing? Is this having an impact? So part of, I think, what is a good thing to understand to kind of get a sense of why we're doing this is between the years of 2011 and 2021, nationally, we saw, I think, something like a 70% increase in traffic fatalities across the board. This is motorists, pedestrians, cyclists, everybody. It was a huge, huge, huge deal that did not get reported very much in the media. I'm not sure why, because it's a giant deal. And so you're going to see a lot of cities working to tackle this in a number of different ways. We've certainly been working to tackle it in Chicago on a number of different fronts. And as of 2023, we have now seen a 27% decrease in traffic fatalities across the city of Chicago. Big deal in and of itself, but particularly a big deal because nationally, we've only seen a 5% decrease. So if you're wondering why all of these things are popping up, that is why all of these things are popping up. We're really hoping to see that trend continue in the coming years. We also had a number of parks projects, including one that is very near and dear to my heart, which is Chicago's newest park, Park 599, opened this past summer. You can see it being used by neighbors this most recent Halloween in the picture to the left. We also had a number of improvement projects in Winamac Park, where we have new tennis and pickleball courts. We have a new turf field that will be it's mostly completed now, it'll be finished for real in 2025. And then we had new workout equipment, tennis courts, and basketball courts at Emerson and Greenbrier Park. So maybe don't go right now, but when it warms up a little bit, check out all of these things. Next for housing, one really exciting thing that we have coming up is the Haven on Lincoln. So it's going to be very close by to here, the former Diplomat Motel site. Earlier this year, the city acquired that property, and it's going to be turned into 40 units of what's known as stabilization housing for people who are experiencing homelessness and maybe dealing with substance abuse or behavioral issues of many kinds. So we're really, really excited about this project as a way of making a sincere difference in tackling homelessness in Chicago. We're really hoping it will be a pilot for many other wards to invest in projects like this that provide real long-term support to help people get on their feet when they're experiencing homelessness. Not yet, but hang on, we also can maybe answer a few more questions about that when we get to the Q&A, but I don't have a specific start date quite yet. So last on the list of things we accomplished in 2024 is our menu program. How many folks are familiar with the menu program? Okay, all right, the word is getting out there. So MENU is the shorthand for the $1.5 million in infrastructure fund that every ward gets every year and can determine how to spend on infrastructure improvement projects. So in our ward, we do part of that through the participatory budget program, where you can vote on how much we should spend on repairs versus new projects and so on and so forth. We'll go over that a little bit more in a bit. But we did a lot of menu projects this past year. We did, I think, 13 alley projects, 20 sidewalk and curb and gutter repairs or replacements, 13 residential street resurfacings. I believe 8 of those were done this year, and 5 of them are carried over to this year in 2025. 17 pedestrian safety projects, and a lot of other stuff that may have been authorized in a previous year. You can see on this map over here how many projects that were worked on this year in the 40th ward. So you can check out 40thward.org/development, where we update that pretty regularly with the map of projects that we're working on and all kinds of information about our menu program. I do want to shout out, because now's a good time to do so, if you have something in your neighborhood that needs fixing, you can submit that to us so we can consider sending it in for this program. If you scan this QR code or you visit bit.ly/40fixit, and that's in all capital letters, you can submit a menu repair request and tell us what in your neighborhood needs to be fixed. You can do this year round, so we usually submit our repair request for the year around this time every year. I think in fact we're doing it at the end of this week, so get them in now. You want to submit them. But even if you don't make that date, you can submit them throughout the year, and if we don't have a budget this year, we will keep it on file for next year. It's a really, really great way of making a tangible difference in your neighborhood. If you see like a stretch of sidewalk that is really busted and needs to be fixed, please submit it to us so we know how to spend those funds. So what else is coming up in 2025? A lot. So you can see here on the left, this is what's known as a capital improvement program map. So you can kind of see where all of the projects are located. Anything in red is a major streets project. Anything in green is a sewer replacement project. And anything in orange is a sewer lining project, which those are a little bit less of a big deal than the others. So we got a bunch of stuff coming up this year. There are 3 arterial resurfacing projects that were originally scheduled for last year and got pushed to this year. 2 that we're extremely excited about are Ashland and Ravenswood, which we have been assured many times now at this point that are happening this year as early as they possibly can. So there's a lot of exciting stuff coming as part of this project. On Ashland in particular, there's a lot of money being put into pedestrian safety improvements, because if you've ever crossed Ashland, as I do once a week as a pedestrian, it's like a game of Frogger. We would like to change that. Does anyone know what that game is, or am I just extremely? Okay. Great. So other than that, we also have Pratt Boulevard is going to be having an arterial resurfacing done as well, and that's going to include some protected bike lanes. We have 2 major streetscape projects, so the completion of Lincoln Avenue North, and then Elise Mallory Plaza in Andersonville on Catalpa between Ashland and Clark should begin later this year, which is very exciting. We have a couple utility improvement projects, including a DWM sewer mainline replacement that's happening near here. I'm very sorry, that's going to be an annoying one if you live in the area, but the good news is we are talking to them, I think, on a weekly basis, and we are going to keep them on track as much as we possibly can so we can get that done for you. We have a few other traffic safety projects coming up. We've got one coming up on Granville that some of you may have heard about in the meeting we held last week. We have the completion of the Berwyn Avenue Bikeway, which I know is going to be very exciting for those of you who are cyclists out there. And then, again, those protected bike lanes on Lincoln and Pratt. And then 2 parks projects. So we have the completion of the Winnemac Park turf field, and then the Warren Park Improvement Project, which we're really excited about, is going to begin this year and include a lot of really wonderful stuff, particularly a lot of things for children and for teens, which is great to see. So, we've told you all the things we're doing. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can get more involved. The thing I want to start with, because this process just ended, is the people's budget, because this is one of the most direct ways that you as a 40th Ward neighbor can get involved. I mentioned earlier we get $1.5 million in menu funds every year to spend. Every ward allocates these differently. In our ward, we use a participatory budgeting framework, which is a fancy way of saying we let you decide because we think it's your money, so you should have a voice in how it's spent. So every year, any 40th Ward resident ages 14 and up can vote on how we spend $1 million of those funds. The other $500,000 we typically keep in reserve for any emergencies that come up throughout the year. And the timeline for this process is typically in January we open new proposals. So if you have an idea of a project that you'd like to see, maybe it's a mural, maybe it's a bigger pedestrian safety project, maybe it is a raised crosswalk somewhere. There's lots of things that you can submit. between now and June, I encourage you all to submit those to our office. And then in the summer, our People's Budget Committee, which is a group of volunteers from the 40th Ward, goes through all of those requests. And first we look to see, like, are these feasible? Can we do them? And then we have each committee member ranks them, and those who are top ranked make up our final ballot that then you as a community in the fall will be able to vote on. And then once that final vote comes through, we as a ward take whichever projects have won, and we get those ready for implementation, and then we take whatever money has been allocated for repairs, and we choose what we are going to request for repairs that year. So this year, we had a record-breaking amount of ballots cast. We had over 2,000 people vote in this past year's People's Budget, and of that, we had the average, I think, that was chosen was 62% of those funds will go to repairs, with 620,000. Yes, got it. And then 38% of that, 380,000, will go towards new projects. With those funds, I do believe we will probably be able to do, I think we will probably be able to do all three of these, but we will at least be able to do 2 of the 3. Our first place winner is the Mather Park Benches and Pathways. I want to shout this one out in particular because we had more student engagement in this year's People's Budget than we ever have had before. There are a number of students in Mather's pre-law program who got really excited about having such a direct impact on government spending, so they went around to every single homeroom and said, hey, something for Mather is on here, you all should vote. They showed them how to fill out the ballots. I think we got hundreds of ballots from Mather High School students, and it's just warms my heart to know that so many students had a direct role in getting this thing done that's going to benefit their school and their park. So that was first place. In second place, we had a pedestrian crossing signal at Berwyn and Western, and then in third place, we had the Budlong Woods Library Butterfly Garden. So we're really excited to get to work on those. If this gives you an idea for a project you would like to see, I hope you will submit it to us. You can visit our website, 40thward.org/PB, and see all of the details, and you'll see a button at the top where you can submit your own proposal for your ideas. So with that, I want to talk about some of the other ways that you can get involved. Oh yes, here, 40thward.org/PB. You can also scan that QR code if you'd like. One thing I do want to mention actually there is when you submit a new project, important things to keep in mind. One, it does have to be in the 40th Ward. That part is probably fairly obvious. Second, it has to count as permanent infrastructure. So something like rat abatement wouldn't count, but something like a new traffic signal would count for that, or a school improvement or a park improvement. So if we're paying for actual infrastructure that will last, we can usually make that happen. If it's something like a staffing or programs, that we usually can't do. So please submit your project proposals at 40thward.org/PB. And then I'm going to bring up Nora, who's going to tell you a little bit more about some of the other ways that you can get involved.
Hello. Hi everybody, my name is Nora. I'm the Neighbor Engagement Coordinator for 40. That means that I oversee a lot of the volunteer programming that comes through our office, as well as I'm sure I've seen a few of you at block parties from last summer. So I do a lot of outreach and engagement for our ward. We have a very robust volunteer program that we call the Neighbor Network. It's comprised of a plethora of different community boards and groups that help us in our day-to-day work at our office and also engage in independent projects on their own. But to take a little step back and show just how engaged our neighbors are with our office, last year we had over 60 volunteer meetups and board meetings, including 16 flyering shifts. Flyering is essentially where we're going out and putting flyers to promote ward-hosted events or programs like the People's Budget, essentially to get the word out and get neighbors informed and engaged with our office. We also have a huge Shovel Squad program. Quick show of hands, are there any Shovel Squad members here this year? It's like all of our staff. Okay, let me take a step back. Are there any Neighbor Network volunteers here? Quick show of hands. I see Deborah, Paul. Deborah and Paul are like the OG volunteers of our office. They've schooled me on a few things when I first started my position here last year. Anywho, we have a huge Shovel Squad program, essentially where we match neighbors with folks who are elderly or have reduced mobility to help them shovel and salt their parkways throughout the winter. We also had a few neighborhood cleanups in the Arcadia Terrace area neighborhood, which certainly needs some TLC and has a trash issue. And then, as mentioned, Deborah and Paul are part of the front desk crew. They help answer phones on like a weekly basis. I think we should have like stat cards for you guys of how many hours you have helped us do intake for all residents who contact our office seeking services. Yes. Great, so how can you get involved? There are many different ways you can get involved. As mentioned, we have the front desk group superheroes. Usually those kinds of shifts, folks sign up like for once a week or every other week for about a 2-hour shift to help do intake with our office. And that usually asks for availability during the daytime hours. We also have Shovel Squad. We are really looking for folks who can help out in Arcadia Terrace, Bowmanville, and Budlong Woods. If you want to get some steps in and maybe like a mini workout, and you live in that area, we would so welcome your help. There's a bunch of neighbors that could use a hand with shoveling and salting. We also have flyering crew. I get my steps in very often, so if you also want to come walking with me in the spring and summer especially, that's a great way to get involved. I also want to mention a couple of different more formal boards that we have. We have something called the Safe Streets Board, that is made up of neighbors who care a lot about infrastructure and pedestrian safety in our ward, and they work on special projects with Allison and probably eventually Kat and Deirdre and kind of myself as well. This is a great way to get a real feel of what infrastructure is all about and all of the tangible ways you can actually bring pretty significant improvements to your block or your neighborhood. And then we also have a very engaged environmental board. They are so engaged that they have like 2 subcommittees. They have one that focuses a lot on home electrification and getting neighbors informed about all of the resources available to them to make their homes more efficient and green. And they also have a Parkways for Pollinators initiative where they work a lot with planting native plants along parkways. And then lastly, just circle back to the People's Budget. This is my personal favorite program, but the People's Budget, we form a committee every single year. As Allison mentioned, right now you can submit all of your project proposals for any ideas of how you want to improve infrastructure in our ward, but then we form a committee, which will be around probably like late May, June, that helps us review all of those proposals and have an active say in what projects projects make our final ballot that you all, I know, will vote on this year. I think I got everything. Great. So I know shortly. Oh, yeah. Okay. We have some like volunteer cards that you guys can fill out if you're interested in getting involved. If you want to chat more, hi, I'm Nora. You can chat with me after this meeting or ask any questions during the Q&A that I'd be happy to answer where appropriate. And we also have a table out front with other QR codes and resources that you guys can pick up and learn more about all the ways you guys can engage. Thank you. Oh yeah, speaking of community, I'd like to pass back to Allison to talk more about that. Thank you.
Knocking over microphones. So quickly, Kat, Deirdre, and Nora are in a few minutes going to start passing around a couple of things. They're going to pass out index cards so you can write down any questions that you have that you'd like answered during the Q&A. And they're also going to hand out some of those volunteer cards. So if you do want to get involved in one of these programs, or you just want to get involved in general, you don't know which program yet, please fill that out, and then Nora will follow up with you in the next couple of weeks and see how we can get you on board. So one last thing we want to mention, we do a ton of events in the 40th Ward, and you should come to them. There are a few things we do weekly. So weekly we have a ward night where if you'd like to meet with Alder Vasquez in person and ask questions, or if you have an issue you want to talk about with him, we have open hours every Monday from 5:30 to 6 p.m. or I'm sorry, 5 to 6:30 p.m. where you can come and meet with him one-on-one. So really encourage you to make use of that. We also do quarterly town halls like we're doing this very moment. We have a vaccine clinic that usually happens in the fall, around October. We have 2 shred events where you can bring us all of your papers that you would like to shred. The next one is coming up on April 19th at 11:30 a.m. It's going to be at the Streets and Sand lot at 5333 Northwestern Avenue. Hope to see y'all out there. In Thanksgiving, we usually host Thanksgiving meals for all of our senior homes in the ward, and usually do at least one turkey giveaway if you want to get a free turkey. We do park and neighborhood cleanups. We hold tax appeal workshops. We visit block clubs, so if you are in a block club, or if you'd like to form a block club because there isn't one in your neighborhood, we would love that, particularly in the Budlong Woods area. We don't have a lot of block clubs, so if you live in that area and you want to get to know your neighbors, start a block club. We can tell you how, and then we'll come visit. And then lastly, this is a new thing that we're starting to do this year. We have found as an office that the more we are like out in the ward, seeing what's going on, checking out issues, checking up on sidewalks that look busted and seeing if they need to be replaced, the better we are at our jobs. So going forward, we're going to start instituting kind of remote Fridays where the physical office will be closed because we will be out in the ward doing stuff. So in general, you'll still be able to hit us up on the phone, hit us up on email, or the contact form. Everybody is still working during those Fridays, but we will be out in the ward taking care of things, doing pothole patrols, following up on repair requests. We're also going to hopefully this summer do some outdoor offices where we post up in some of the parks so that you don't have to come quite so far to come tell us what's going on and get some help from our office. And we're going to be doing office hours at the senior homes across the ward. So our seniors who live in those homes don't have to go too far out to get help and get support. So keep that in mind. If you're usually a Friday person, it's still fine. You can get a hold of us. You just might not be able to come into the office on Friday. But you can still call us, email us, submit a contact form, and we will get back to you as quickly as we ever do. So with that, I'm going to bring up Alder Vasquez, who's going to talk a little bit about the city council side of things, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So please do start writing down those questions you have for us.
Thank you very much. All right, so I know for me, it's felt like I spent the last quarter in City Hall. Have you all paid attention to any of the budget process? And so we really want to make sure we focus on all of the services that we do in the board. but we do take the legislative part of our job seriously, and so I want to go through things that we've accomplished and things that we're working on. Right? All right, so we've done a whole ton. I know this is a lot, so I won't go through every single thing, but I'll highlight some notables. So we did do, as far as housing, a Western Avenue proactive rezoning in the area to help incentivize kind of more density growth in a way that allows for property taxes, although they rise, to be more absorbed by more people as opposed to not being there and having steeper kind of increases. Public transportation, I was able to move forward legislation and call for quarterly CTA hearings of the CTA president, who is no longer the president, so now we're going to see the new one is. But that allowed us to increase more accountability as it relates to CTA. We also led on bike lane enforcement and getting the first pilot started related to automated camera enforcement. We also released Mallory Plaza, as we were mentioning before. It's actually the first actual location, place, in tribute of a black trans woman. And so knowing the world we're living in now and the country as it currently stands, we want to make sure we're articulating our values and living them. So it is a huge accomplishment that we're proud of to be able to get that going. Modernizing government. So we had reestablished 2 departments actually. One is the Department of Technology and Innovation, so we can continue actually moving forward. We might even get into the 20th century if we keep pushing. But we do have 311 improvements, and we're going to continue building on that. And we also reestablished the Department of Environment. So that was taken down and ripped apart by Rahm Emanuel. We brought it back this term. Yes, thank you. And then a big one that we got done this last budget. How many of y'all are fans of the last budget process? Please. That's right. I join you in that feeling. So part of my negotiation in this budget process was to actually change the budget process. So I've been working on this for a number of years. Some of you may know in 2020, our office was the office to introduce the actual whole budget from the city council. It's the first time that had been done in decades. So I'm that invested in making sure we have a better process. So this past budget process, I negotiated to change our process. I just said process way too much. I just did it again. So that we didn't spend just the last 2 months of the year talking about it. We have to have a year-long process. So now we're going to have mid-year reporting, mid-year hearings, more regular reporting, so we have more accountability, and we're partnering with different good government agencies to make sure we get better results, because Lord knows the last budget process was a mess. So we're going to continue working on that. That's right. Woo for the mess. I guess. No, that's right. That's not. Oh, thank you. Woo for the improvement. Just want to clarify for the neighborhood. So things that we're working on going forward. We know about the bridge housing or stabilization housing over at the Haven on Lincoln. We're also working on extreme weather preparation. So we all know how cold it is right now. We have a lot of unhoused neighbors and not a lot of resources. The city talks about warming shelters that it has, but it names things like your libraries and your parks as warming shelters where the employees don't know that they're warming shelters. We've got 24-hour warming shelters where people aren't allowed to stay for 24 hours. So we want to make sure we're improving on that. We're also working on green social housing, so this is where the city would either acquire or build properties that then are somewhat tenant-owned and make sure they're built sustainably in a way that leads to more affordability, so we're working on pilots for that. Accessibility, we're working on a language access ordinance. We have hundreds of languages spoken in the city of Chicago. We do not have hundreds of languages that are able to be accessed when it comes to city government or our ward offices. We want to continue to make sure that gets improved. When it comes to our LGBTQ representation, we partner with Chicago Therapy Collective on a campaign called Hire Trans Now to make sure that when we think about hiring staff, that we're asking the right questions to make sure people feel supported and we are the best employer in the city as it relates to all the different identities that we have here in the city. We're going to continue working on 311 improvements, tree trim portals. We're going to expand the Smart Street pilot. We're able to get a BRT study, so that's Bus Rapid Transit. It's trying to get like Western or other large streets to have a bus lane to make transit so much better that you're less reliant on vehicles. And if you can get that going better, get more people riding the bus and trains, you're able to better invest in it and you create a system that's more reliable and safe. So the more we continue to work on that, the better. We're also working on congestion pricing, so we're starting to engage in these conversations. Just for clarity, some of our colleagues talk about congestion pricing as it relates to downtown. I fundamentally think it's not the way to go. I think you're dividing more communities when you make it more expensive to go into downtown. So when I think about it, we're looking at the tollways. So all these fellow suburban siblings that we love can actually pay for the roads they're tearing up as they're coming in here. So I think establishing it that way will make it less divisive and actually help us maintain these roads. And then continue on the good government. So even though we've got the year-long budget process, we want more access to data. We also, I'm a huge advocate of actually establishing independent department audits. So as you all know for this past budget, huge fight about trying to figure out property taxes to pay for the cost of government, but also to try to find efficiencies. So as we try to find efficiencies, I think we've got to look at these departments to make sure they're effective. If you start to do independent budgets instead of relying on a budget office and a mayor, you actually get better details rather than a sales pitch. And when you want to look at these departments, I think you start with the largest department and you work your way down. The largest expenditure we have in city government is the Chicago Police Department. It's 40% of the corporate budget. So when we talk about efficiencies, we're doing a disservice to the neighbors to not look at that. It's about $3 billion worth, right? So we want to look at that as well as other departments to make sure we are effective, that we're not burning out our officers, that they're doing jobs that are actually on their core functions rather than everything else under the sun that we're calling them for, right? So that, and then tomorrow, fingers crossed, the curbstoning ordinance, as we've mentioned before, but also CPS quarterly hearings. So the same way we call for CTA to do so, I believe we need to do the same for the CPS CEO, whoever that may be going forward, to make sure that similarly, if part of our tax dollars is going to making those payments to the pension debt, to make sure we know what's happening there as well. It's a fair conversation to have. So that's what we're working on among a litany of other things, and that's just the policy is not the Committee on Immigrant Refugee Rights. Those of you who may know, chairing that committee this past year, we had 2 years, we had to deal with the, address the migrant mission and hold the administration accountable. I might mention some greatest hits like Garter World, or tents on 38th in California, or evicting people after 60 days of being in the shelter. It was ultimately our committee that had to hold the Johnson administration to accountability to make sure we're treating people with the respect they deserve, but also to make sure that we're trying to use the dollars as best as possible. We often hear about the expenditures spent on the migrant mission. We have concerns about stuff like paper staffing, for example, but we also want to make sure that people understand that if you don't fund what occurred during the migrant mission, you still pay for it when you look at the increase in homelessness. So one way or the other, we were paying for it. Finding out a responsible way to do so that still treats Chicagoans like Chicagoans, and I remind people, and this I'll remind for those of you who haven't been born here, even the suburbanites that came from the suburbs, we love you to death. You live in Chicago, you're Chicago, whether it's one day or ever since you were born. You're a Chicagoan once you're here. We want to make sure we treat you as such. So we did mutual aid events. We did Know Your Rights trainings. We did workshops. We visited the shelters. I walked in, not undercover, but walked in and checked them out myself. So we've done all that and we're reporting out. Going forward, because it's less of a migrant mission, right? We've actually moved that into a one system shelter, and we have to make sure that's accountable. But because of what's been going on, we do even more workshops, more trainings, more Know Your Rights, and make sure we follow up. So we're going to do quarterly hearings of the committee to report back all of the things that we're doing and to make sure that we get that information to you all. We're also working on, I mentioned the language access, but also street vendor modernization. So if you're making a hot dog, you kind of know what that is. There's rules in place. But if you come from a different culture, whether it's Chinatown or Little Village, there's different ways of preparing food that are not covered by the municipal code. And therefore makes it harder for people to sustain themselves when they're trying to actually have these businesses move forward. There are places like Little Village where it's known and people go to check out some of the street vendors, but we don't create a system that allows them to operate properly and allows us as a city to collect some revenue for actually operating properly, because Lord knows that's how government works, right? So we want to get that going. We're going to do business canvassing. We're partnering with the clerk Anna Valencia to actually visit different places in Chicago that have different concentrations of the immigration population and make sure we talk to those communities as well to continue to make sure people feel supported. Something we want to do is focus on economic impact about what we're going through right now. If you've got ICE doing raids, you've got less people going to businesses, you've got less businesses operating, you've got different store hours, you're taking a hit on your economy. We want to make sure we're tracking that as well to tell the full picture of what the impact is. So for those neighbors who may not be fully with us as to why we're doing this and like our value set, we still want to talk about the numbers and show why it's a benefit to make sure that we continue being a sanctuary city. All right, you can learn more at 40thward.org/CIRR, all caps, or our website, welcometoschicago.org. So here is our next one. We're also going to be doing regular weekly immigration briefings. So you can go to bit.ly/CIR briefing, CIRR briefing, or check the QR code. We want to do those virtually to let people know what's happening, because as we know, there's so many changes happening at the federal level, so many different executive orders, so many things that are going on. We need to make sure folks are updated, that they're empowered, that they're aware, and they can support where possible. So we'll be sharing this regularly. Please make sure you tune in. We'll have the information on the newsletter as well. We've done so much together, and we can do so much more. Look at that, look at all this. Thank you all seriously for all the help that you all do. Let's continue to make sure we're improving the 40th ward. I'll compete with any board in the city of Chicago. I think you guys might feel the same way. And I want to make sure we continue setting a standard for how we deliver services and come together as a community. So here's some things you can do to help. One, sign up for the newsletter. How many people are not signed up for the newsletter? Put a hand up. That's right, not a single one, because you guys know that's what the information's at. Although you do tag me on Facebook and other social media as well. Newsletter is really great to get the general info. Volunteer for Neighbor Network. Follow us on all the social media platforms. My team's not the most happy about that, but our neighbors seem to love it, because whenever there's anything going on, they tag us on Facebook. Happy to answer their questions. But also get your shot 311 app going. So spread the word to at least one neighbor. Make sure your whole block knows how to reach us. And I will ask this again. Who here does not have the Shy 311 app on their phone? Can I see a hand up? This is the intermission time where you will download that on your phones. iPhone or Android. It is the best way to put down a request with the most amount of detail. You can pinpoint where you want the request to happen. You then call us with the SR number or the service request number, and we can then escalate. It's how we can best deliver services. Facebook complaints are helpful. Not as helpful as actually putting a request in, having the kind of number to track it. Fair? Great. No pushback on that. Love it. All right. And here's how you can contact us. Instagram, Facebook, the app formerly known as Twitter. We continue to keep it on because when it comes to government and providing services, at that level we're agnostic. Whether we agree with somebody ideologically or not, they can contact us for services, right? So we want to make sure we're accessible, and we don't want people coming up with excuses of why they can't contact us. Not that you guys would do that, just in case. Office hours are up here. We've got the website, our office phone number, the contact request form. Our office address is 5620 Northwestern. And yes, that is my cell phone number. 773-999-3313. Shoot a text message instead of a call, because I'm actually in meetings. City Hall, in meetings with neighbors. If you shoot a text, we can then forward it to the team if it is extremely urgent. I look at that one as your break glass in case of emergency. But it is my cell phone. I know because I get the text messages all night. It's okay though. All right. It's true. You guys know that. All right. I think we don't have the next slide. So this is where we get to the Q&A portion. So we're going to go with the questions. That's right.
Yes. Thank you all so much for such great questions. We got a couple of questions about the Haven on Lincoln, the housing project at the Diplomat Motel. Can you talk about the timeline and how neighbors can support the project?
Sure. First, I'll say that it was supposed to be built by the end of last year. What was actually holding it up is contract negotiations between the contractor and the city of Chicago. There were concerns about liability, so those contracts and the lawyers were all talking to each other. There did need to be some extra funding that we actually worked towards. Came up in our finance committee this past, actually about a week and a half ago. So that's continuing to move forward. We're being told it should start sometime next year, but I am a fan of accountability, so I want to make sure.
This year.
This year. I was getting it ready so you guys don't feel disappointed if it's next year. This year. Huh? Well, I mean, it ain't done till it's done. But, yeah, we've been told 2025. I think we're going to continue holding them accountable. As with a number of things that we've seen, we have to continue pushing, right, to make sure it gets completed, and we'll continue to do so. Yeah.
We got a bunch of policy questions, so I'm going to start with this question, which I personally love. Can you devote one of your quarterly town hall meetings exclusively to policy topics and positions?
We have this debate constantly at the office, not constantly. Our third town hall will be devoted to policy. So the first one will be general, Ward 101. Second one will be development. Third one will be policy. Just did that for you guys. And then the fourth will be budget, because Lord knows we get to talk about that every year. So, yep.
Awesome. So a couple of these policy questions. First of all, the 20th District Commander the 20th District Council meeting with the commander was terrific, and she offered and admitted that hiring civilians to CPD would free up police officers to be more effective. Why can't we do something about this?
So we are working on it. So there's a workforce allocation study that Alderman Matt Martin's leading on, we're co-sponsoring. We want to make sure we get the answers on really how best to utilize the resource. And when I say that, I mean people. When we talk about CPD, I believe their core functions are threefold. One is investigation, 2, apprehension, 3, emergency response and appropriate. The things that I don't believe are part of the core function, some of the administrative work, mental health disorder, substance use disorder, a cat gets stuck in a tree, hey, somebody's parking in a permanent parking spot. So we've got to look and figure out not just hiring more people in the CPT to do the work, but having different departments address it in a way that allows our police force to focus on their core functions. We don't talk about that enough. We lump everything under one department. We let that blow up when it comes to the actual funding, and we still don't get a more effective police department. So we want to make sure we balance that out, and that's part of what these budget conversations need to be about. Yeah, Michael, what's up?
You know, the superintendent has already hired 126 civilians to join the Chicago Police Department, and they're doing very, very well. I don't understand why that has to wait until the allocation final is 1 year away. And the commander at the meeting, where's DJ?
Right over here.
And she started it.
You just started it. Yeah.
No. It was a great meeting. It was the best meeting I've been to in those counties. But the commander said, yes, we know about that. And we know that New York and LA are much more effective with reducing violence per capita than Chicago is. She knew that, and she implied that a lot of commanders know that. So why the hell can't we go through with that during the allocation?
Yes, I think it'll be part of it. It's part of the allocation, and then the other part is political. And I will ask 2 questions that I ask everybody. Ready? Who wants to see the property tax increase? Please put a hand up. Great. Who wants us to hire more officers and spend more money in the police department? Right, we see more of those hands up. I mean, I think folks on the board kind of know how we talk about it, right? Those things are hard to balance out. Because if you're hiring more people, you got to pay for it. Which means you got to increase the property taxes to pay for it. So I think we need a conversation about what it looks like to be more effective, which sometimes means being more efficient and knowing what the focus should be. But it's such a political hot potato that most city council members don't really want to even have a conversation about it. Because every time people think about public safety, it's so visceral. People are like, we're at a deficit, we need more officers, we don't have enough, where are they at, I want to see them on the block. As opposed to really directing the ones that we have to be adequate and handle responsibility. But that's a more nuanced conversation to have that sometimes the neighbors will push back on, but I'm glad our neighbors don't.
Andre, you're talking about civilians, which are much less costly than Chicago.
You'd be surprised. The Office of Public Safety Accountability, for example, was created to save money. It hasn't saved a bit. It's actually gone millions. So again, it's about having trust, and if you give people the money, they know to spend it. So that is part of it too. But I would direct people to go to the 20th District CCPSA meetings, that's the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability. Show on up to ask more questions, because that is what they are elected to do.
I don't know if you also want to talk about the 911 call data and the hearing coming up about parking specifically, because there are maybe some small ways we could move forward on some of the stuff while the allocation study is going on.
Yeah, we're seeing a whole bunch of calls that are coming in just because people are parking where they shouldn't, and they're calling officers to go handle that. We know it's not a way to do it. Trust, we've even tried to pass, we're working on maybe deputizing some folks to just give tickets. Dear goodness, we'd love to get those tickets and be able to put them out. But there's a union conversation because that's somebody else's job. So there's a number of reasons. I think these are good questions to have, and I definitely direct folks to take it to our 28 district councilors.
Can you say more about the Green Social Housing Initiative? What can we do to help with that?
Yeah, so right now there's two versions. The Johnson administration will be introducing one tomorrow that's about building properties, and then myself, Alderwoman Hatton, and Alderman Gil Villegas are doing one based on acquisition of properties. So, as I said, it's taking the funds to either build or buy properties to then make sure that they're sustainable and that they can be affordable. That's going to require a lot of work to even figure out the math on. As we've seen, when it comes to the city subsidizing cost for affordability, you're talking now about $800,000 per unit. Not necessarily the most affordable way to do it. So we want to, figure out what's the best way the city government can get involved, but also I think it's an and also question about really making sure that developers are able to build in a way that helps create density, because the more units you have, the more competitive the market gets and the more it can drive costs down. So we're actually looking at it through a variety of lenses. How you can help is joining the environmental board. So as we're talking through it, we can make sure you can help us get the word out to other neighbors about it.
Awesome. We got a number of questions about some of the federal changes right now, and especially with federal funds. So we got a couple of questions about what will happen to the city if these federal funds get withheld, and do we have any ability to do anything about that? And then we also got a question specifically about CDPH and how things like the vaccine clinic can continue if we see those cuts.
Yeah, what can we do about it? Stress out and pray at this point. I know you're watching what's happening with the federal government. It is a constitutional crisis. We are watching what occurs when an executive branch is doing everything possible to push past what's even legal to do. And so making sure that we are in best preparation requires building community. I'm going to be honest with you, right? CDPH, 84% funded by the federal government. Department of Family Support Services, about 50%. Department of Housing, about 50%. So if you can imagine a president in office, let's say his name was Trump, for example, deciding that he's going to actually gut funding to any sanctuary city with the intent of causing division, chaos, and disruption. Imagine those departments being gutted, and then you have to understand why it's even more important that we look at our budgets and figure out how to best allocate funds. Because if you've got departments that are bloated, for lack of a better term, and the other ones that are funded largely by the federal government, you're going to have to reallocate funds to better address it. Why I mentioned building community being the best thing that we can do, we just went through an example of what it looks like when a government isn't prepared for a situation. We went through a pandemic, and during that time, it was neighbors helping each other out. It was neighbors that were sewing masks, delivering food to people who needed it, making sure that everyone had all the information possible. So I'm not going to kid you folks. It's making sure that people are informed. The other thing I would say that neighbors can do that would have the most impact is talk to your neighbors. There's a reason why the federal government that's currently elected did get elected. Those numbers went up all across the country. And if you think about the root cause of why people vote, I would say that it's not necessarily because people are just divisive and bitter. I think when you look at the fact that you maybe have a government that you feel hasn't met your needs, regardless of party, it might take a gamble on the reality show star. So if you want to get to the point where we're better addressing that, you better listen to your neighbors about what are the things they wish government would do better so we can actually do them better. If you don't get a return on your investment, you withdraw, you don't vote, you get disenfranchised whether willingly or not, or you get a bit angry and you vote in reflex rather than reflecting. And so we want to make sure that what you can do best is talk to your neighbors, because they are your neighbors. They're not just the folks that are on your phone algorithms. They're the ones next door that maybe you should just knock on the door and talk to them sometimes.
I will also add to that, when you're dealing with federal issues, we obviously as a municipality we're limited to the kind of, we have no leverage at all basically over the federal government in many ways, but you know who does? Your congressperson. You should call your congressperson, you should call your senators. If you have any concerns about federal funding, those are the people to talk to. They're the people who appropriate it, and they're the people who have the responsibility to do something about it if those funds aren't being appropriated.
And talk to your state folks. There's a budget address tomorrow that the governor's going to make. They have, if I remember correctly, a $3 billion hole. They've got to figure out those numbers, and we got to figure out how we can find mutual interest in partnering up to actually get revenue to address the things we need, because we're all operating under the same constraints.
All right, we're gonna take a left turn into potholes.
Let's not do left turns into potholes. It's not good for your tires. Just,
Potholes on the border between the 40th and 50th. Who's responsible?
we actually point at each other and go, you do it. No, if we're driving down the street and I see a pothole, I'm pulling over and putting the request in. If it's on the border, here in the 40th ward in Chicago, we don't have borders. They're just lines. So I'm more than happy to put a request in wherever I may see one. I don't necessarily do it in other wards that often, because if I kept stopping every time, people keep honking at us from behind. In the 40th ward, I think people are a little more used to it. I used to have my name on the car. I had a new car. We don't have a sticker on it yet. We may not for a while, but either way, we put the tickets in. Cool. Also, you can do it. You can literally walk out in front of your street. You look at the street, you put some tickets in to the one that's in front of your house. We don't want you guys pulling over every time you see one, but in front of your house, you can do that.
Also, importantly, we do export every request, those that we submitted and those that neighbors submitted twice a year, and send them all to CDOT. So you can be part of Pothole Patrol.
Let's clarify. We put in all the tickets. We pull in the 301 tickets. We put it on a spreadsheet. We create a map out of the spreadsheet. We send the department the spreadsheet and the map to show them how more effectively to cover the potholes. Because they'll zip from one corner of the ward to the other, and then back to the same corner to cover the second pothole that was in the same spot. Not efficient, not effective, which is why we do it 2 times a year. It's real.
We have pedestrian crossing signs. Most of the time I have to wait for multiple cars to go by before one deigns to stop for me. Have y'all looked into the feasibility of adding lights to these crossings that are weight activated, especially on major roads? So I think what you're talking about here are the rapid flashing beacons. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at that. We've also looked at like the ones that let you know if you're going too fast and give you the speed. There's some costs associated. We also want to figure out what they can be done. So we actually have put in requests for those with the city, and then they kind of look and see what the traffic impacts will be. I think what we want to do ultimately, and what you're seeing happen in Accordion, is creating that type of infrastructure that disincentivizes that kind of behavior. Your bump outs, your raised crosswalks in ways that limit people from actually speeding or not paying attention to what's in front of them. We're going to continue to build that as well. But yeah, we do that too.
Awesome. I will also say, if there's a specific intersection you're concerned about, report it to our office, because we can submit that to CDOT and have them look and see if one of those signs is feasible for that location.
I feel like I'm on a game show still.
All right. So we got a lot of questions about this when folks were still coming in, about what to do if people see ICE activity in their neighborhood. What should people do?
Yeah, I'll say that there's groups in the ward as well as across the city that have rapid response networks. I can't get into detail of some of these groups because they're a little bit more political rather than government, but I would advise folks to look that up. There's definitely places in R40 that you can find that in. The other thing I would say, remember a phone number first. 855-435-7693. That's the number to the Illinois Coalition of Immigrant Refugee Rights. It's where you call if you see ICE. What we want to make sure for rule number 1, remain calm. Understand that the intent of what they're doing is to disrupt, to cause people to be afraid, to cause chaos. It's part of their marketing tactic, and they don't have enough people as they want to say they do, but they want to cause that disruption. Make sure you're calm. If they don't have a warrant signed by a judge, you have the right to remain silent, just as you have the right to remain calm. Utilize them both. If you're a neighbor that sees any activity, call it in. Again, it's 855-435-7693. And then if you feel comfortable, you pull out your phone, record interactions. It might be helpful in a court of law based on what might occur. So call the number, again, 855-435-7693. Report out what you see, record what you can, and make sure you let us know. We're happy to figure out what we can provide help.
Importantly, if you do report, please make sure to include as much information as you can about how many folks are out there, what they're doing, what cars they're driving. That just helps people at ICER, who is that hotline that Alder Vasquez just talked about, identify if this is confirmed ICE activity. So the more information you can give them, the better. We have a question about speed limits. If this 25 miles per hour speed limit passes, will it be enforced?
Woo! If is a big if, I'll say that first. I think a lot of our colleagues are a little bit concerned. about supporting it for a number of reasons. As you all saw, the moratorium on the speed cameras was lifted. So some folks feel like, well, let's see what this does compared to speed limit. Other folks are concerned about the cost of signage. Other folks just want to figure out, are people actually going to change their behavior? So we got a couple answers for all of the above. Our prior commissioner of the Department of Transportation, Gia Biaggi, is now the commissioner for the state's actual Department of Transportation. So we're going to go ask for that money to cover those signs. That's not a done deal yet, but it's good that we have a relationship to try to figure out what some of that cost may be. Speed cameras do provide some level of enforcement, but actually lowering the speed limit itself has been shown to actually change the behavior somewhat. So even doing so might change it. Here's a reminder for folks. We have a 30 mile per hour speed limit. However, you can drive 6 miles over it and not be held accountable. I don't know what the word limit means, but I think it means 30 should be the limit, but it's not actually what happens. Similarly, if it goes down to 25, you still got the 6 mile kind of cushion there, which actually put you 31 miles an hour. So you lower the speed limit while actually increasing the limit. I don't understand how that works, but this is what we're actually trying to do as a city. I think we want to make sure that our neighbors understand that it's about safety when people are worried that it might be about a money grab. If we lower the speed limit and we got 0 cents and $0, we'd be a better city because that would mean less people are speeding, right? So we want to make sure we're doing it in a responsible fashion. It is coming up for a vote tomorrow. I'll be in support. We will see how it all bears out. It's going to be a pretty big day, Councilman.
I'll also say between, I think, 25 miles an hour and 30 miles an hour, if you're a pedestrian that is hit, it can have something like a, I think, 20% difference in whether you live or die. So it can sound like we're kind of, nitpicking, but it really does have a huge difference on traffic fatalities.
Yeah, also we're an outlier. Most major cities are already there. So us just having parity with other major cities makes sense and also part of the conversation.
Can you talk about the plans for business development on Lincoln Avenue North?
Yes, we're actually starting to have those conversations. We actually had them for some time, but I think we're being more proactive. So we've got a number of developments that are occurring, Winamac Lincoln, Foster Lincoln, Farragut Lincoln, right, that are all developing. We've talked to those developers about creating live workspaces on the ground. So if you'd imagine a smaller storefront that's also an apartment for like a first-time artist, your person who can afford a place to live, but not a place to live, and also a storefront, in a way to make them more affordable and get them filled. But also part of the job is actually marketing. So what we're also going to do this year is schedule kind of like a workshop or a town hall for business owners, developers, realtors, to show them what the opportunities are along Lincoln and start connecting some of these empty storefronts to first-time business owners or business owners that want to expand and find a way to create those partnerships. If you don't do that intentionally, you're just waiting and it's not going to move as quickly as it can be. But what we know is that the cost of square footage north of Lawrence on Lincoln, way cheaper than south of Lawrence on Lincoln. And equally the same opportunity as we're creating the Ainsley Arts Plaza, which is being built right now this year, to then do more markets, more events, more programming, to draw more people to a destination, and then have them check out the storefronts. So we're looking to partner up. A big focus is also Lawrence and Western. It was originally trying to be a Whole Foods, the neighbor said no. Then it was going to be Amazon Fresh, the neighbor said hell no. And so now we're looking to identify something that's not a grocery store, not even Trader Joe's, calm down people, and figuring out another business that might be an anchor and help that sustain, and then maybe building the residential density on top to actually make it a building and project that makes sense.
How do we get businesses to do snow removal on their sidewalks?
Ticket them. You hold them accountable, right? Like, technically residents as well, but here we have a shovel squad to do so. But if you're a business owner, or actually if you're an owner of a larger property, right, it is incumbent upon you to actually get that done. So if you see that it's not, you submit a ticket or you fill out the contact form, so we then know to hold them accountable. Same thing for folks that are, parking cars on the sidewalk. There's enough of those on Western, where we're continuing to have our public way inspectors, Department of Finance, go and do passes to ticket them.
Can we get street cleaning every month? I've been getting it in early October, but not in November. We really need it.
This would all be great. Every year, we try to get them to continue to work past November. The challenge is that the same staff every year has to make sure the snowmobiles already, the street sweepers, as well as the snowplows. It takes a lot of time after the wear and tear of a whole year to get them ready. And so when you have the same amount of staff handling all of it in the same amount of storage, that transition is what makes it harder to do both in the same period. And if they did not take the time to actually fix and repair those vehicles, then y'all would be asking why nothing's getting plowed. And so that is part of the trade-off there. That being said, we have had years where if they've already done a pass, but the leaves actually fell way after that, that if there's still time at the end of the year, or before Thanksgiving typically, we go to them and say, hey, can we do another pass over here because this didn't get handled? So the more you report to us, we can't promise that it's going to be done every time, but letting us know allows us to really talk to the commissioner to try to get more focus on it.
¿Conoces España?
Huh?
Yes.
I've never been to Spain, but I do know Spanish. So, conozco España. Nunca he ido a España, pero sí hablo español.
We do have several staff members as well who speak Spanish in our office, so if you're a Spanish speaker, come on in.
Thought they would have me do card tricks next year.
Let's see.
While you're doing that, the bond vote tomorrow. I'm surprised that hasn't come
That was
up
the
yet.
next question.
Hey, psychic, look at that. I should have done the Creston. How many of y'all know Creston, Carson? A couple of y'all do. All right, make sure we got quizzes here. So, tomorrow there's a vote for borrowing $830 million in a bond to do infrastructure repair. So when we talk about menu, bridges, streets, these are the funds that pay for those repairs. Not voting for that will lead to some of that actually stalling and not being able to be done. So when thinking about that bond, there's a couple of concerns, right? What are the credit agencies going to say if you're borrowing money, knowing that you guys just got your credit score lowered because of how the budget process went? That answers part of the question. You got your credit score lowered because of how the budget process went. They watched the city council doing it and said, why are you guys acting like kids in a sandbox? Figure this out. And it was that activity that led to the lowering of the credit rating. Now, when you look at infrastructure money, what we know is all cities have to figure out fixing roads and bridges and everything that allow people to actually live in the city. So that's viewed a little bit differently when we talk about that. Now, the concern that we all have is borrowing any level of money and the lack of trust in the current mayoral administration. We know that every decision they make, everyone here, rightfully so, has like a second. We give it the side eye. We have a lack of trust on how it's being executed. There's not the accountability and transparency necessary. We're talking about someone who recommended a short-term high-interest loan to pay off a debt for CPS. So it is very real to have concerns about the decisions. It makes perfect sense to answer all the questions. We have questions as well. But the two things can be true. We can have this concern about the decision-making of the fifth floor, while also recognizing we have to pay for infrastructure and that getting the bond moving forward to do so is important. Lord knows we had enough stuff that was already slowed down. So it's definitely something I'm weighing, and when I think about it, I know that given the Trump administration gutting funding for everything, we're probably going to need every penny we have in order to make those repairs if the federal government decides they're not going to have grants for our city, for example. So I do, as you're asking me right now, plan to support it, but I'm always open if I'm getting more information. But I just think that we do have to make sure we're continuing to improve and fix these roads so people can actually use them, and that way we're not doing pothole patrol every month. We'd like to not have to do that.
Susan Mendoza came out in the Sun-Times with an op-ed that was highly critical of the loan.
Yeah, most people that want to run for mayor are highly critical all the time. So, the mayor can say today was Tuesday, and you might get an op-ed wondering why he said it was Tuesday. That being said, even when it's someone who has a different self-interest, they may have real good points. We do have concerns about any borrowing that occurs. The difference of why I look at it, or why I look at this one differently, is specifically infrastructure, right? I'm dubious of it. I voted no against this budget because they did a very irresponsible thing. They said, we're not going to raise any level of property tax to pay for costs that continue to go up, which is going to cause a bigger deficit this year, right? So I have problems with how they move forward. It's why I negotiated to change the budget process, because I don't trust them, right? Let's just be honest about it. That doesn't mean that we can't, repair things. Because y'all are gonna feel a certain kind of way if these streets are even more torn up, and the only answer we have to do all this, well, we don't have the money because we voted against getting the money. And so I think that's where it's a privilege to be able to be in a position where you're not in city government, where we have to answer these things, right? You could be another level of government where nobody's asking you what's happening to the roads and maybe they don't understand how you work finances. Y'all come to us when these things aren't working. And so therefore there's a different level of emphasis that we have that might be different if you weren't city government, which is the one that is right at your door. Yeah, thank you for the question.
We have just a couple other questions that I think also maybe have a little bit to do with some of the budget accountability things that you've been talking about. One of them is, I'm concerned about the slow pace of police compliance with court-ordered reform and continuing large payments due to police misconduct. What can we do about this?
Sure, let's level set for people. So the city of Chicago has a consent decree issued by the Department of Justice. How long does it take for a consent decree to be completed? Typically about a decade. How far are we in? 5 years. For math experts, that's halfway through. How far are we done? Or how far are we completed on it? About 5%. That's right. That's how horrible this is. When you look at the effects, it affects your pocketbooks. It affects your tax dollars. Every year, we spend over $100 million in police misconduct settlements. Whether it's wrongful convictions, whether it's misconduct, brutality, abuse. You're talking, this past year alone, I think it was $150 million. In this budget coming up, we budgeted $82 million. Again, for our math folks. Less than $100 million, less than $150. If we don't take it seriously and work on these things, we're gonna have a problem. And this administration, I'll remind you all, during our past budget, was actually trying to cut the jobs of those lawyers that would help move the consent decree forward. Not exactly fiscally responsible, and not justice, if you want to be honest about it. So we have to continue to push to make sure that there is some accountability there. It's why I would ask folks to email us. Email your other alders who don't always make it a priority. Email the mayor's office. Tune in to your Commission for Public Safety and Accountability, your CCPSA, and go visit the 20th District.